ask for your knowledge, your wisdom, and your understanding as we prepare, God, to deliberate business that ultimately affect our people. Father, in this moment, we ask that you continue to bless this great city that we call Miami Gardens, its leadership, God, residents, stakeholders, everyone that has something to do with this amazing, thriving city. God, continue to rain your many blessings upon all of us. All these things I ask in your son name, I do pray. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Clerk, we're on presentations.
Yes, item 4.1, budget presentation by the city manager. This is sponsored by the city manager.
Mr. Manager.
Mr. Mayor, council members, vice mayor, thank you so much for the opportunity to present the budget to you in this workshop forum. I'm going to ask the Deputy City Manager, Craig Clay, to do the presentation. But before I do that, I want to thank the mayor and council members for your due diligence with staff, with Craig and myself, in going over the budget and talking through a number of issues. I also want to congratulate the staff and the budget office. If you guys could please stand, please. Thank you. And recognize them for all their hard work, and certainly the department heads and everybody else that has had a hand in giving that input into the budget this year. I do appreciate it. We spent a number of hours and time on this, and so hopefully after today's 5:30 meeting, we'll have a budget moving forward for the next fiscal year. So thank you very much. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Craig Clay.
Mr. Clay, before you begin, I also want to echo the same sentiments. I thought you guys did a wonderful job with this budget. It was prepared greatly. You took everything under consideration. I really appreciate all the work that Mr. Manager, your staff did, the finance department, and everyone who had anything to do with this budget. So thank you, guys.
All right. Good afternoon, Mayor Harris, Vice Mayor Wilson, members of the City Council, Craig Clay, Deputy City Manager. This afternoon, I'd like to provide a review of our discussion from July. Additionally, I'll update you on one open item that we had from the July meeting. I'll provide an update on some key anticipated expenditures that we talked about, provide some detail regarding various infrastructure projects as requested at the July meeting, and finally, we'll open the floor for any of your questions regarding the budget document and the informational memorandum that was provided to you. Back in July, I provided information to you regarding the growth in the city's taxable value. So for the 11th consecutive year, the city experienced positive growth. On the slide before you, in 2024, the city's taxable value increased from approximately $6.9 billion to $7.9 billion in fiscal 2024. In the chart before you, we've summarized this into three major areas. New construction at $379 million, growth in our existing tax base at $551 million, and growth in the CRA at $91 million. New construction accounts for those projects which receive a certificate of occupancy or CO prior to December 31st of the prior year for which is being valued. So in this case, those projects which received a certificate of occupancy by December 31st, 2022 are accounted for in that new construction number. In your July presentation, we listed several examples for you, but in summary, those new construction projects we discussed added over 1,000 units of residential housing and a little over 2 million square feet of commercial retail space. Based on our July 1st taxable value, we are recommending maintaining the operating millage rate at 6.9363 mills. Also, due to that growth, the debt service millage rate is being reduced to 0.5284 mills, which reduces our total millage rate from 7.5433 mills to 7.4647 mills. There is an inverse relationship between taxable value and millage rate, and this is exactly what we would like our city to continue to do. Those orange bars, we want to see them increase. In that blue line, we want to see it continue to go down. In July, we were waiting on an estimate for communication services tax. We received the estimate in early August, which was about $130,000 over what we had received in fiscal year 2023. When we look at expenses, first, we look at personnel. This budget includes a pay increase of 5%, a salary adjustment of 5% for all non-bargaining unit employees. That increase will take effect as of October 1st. Further, on July 1st, the Florida Retirement System released its new pension rates for fiscal year 2024. The rates increased, as you can see on the slide before you, by an average of 14.26%. This is a significant increase. To put that in perspective for you, last year's average increase across all employee categories was 7.42%. In our last workshop, I also mentioned to you something that we called the big O, as Vice Mayor Wilson would say. And that was the increase in insurance premiums for property, casualty, and general liability. We discussed an increase of 172% from our previous year. After meeting with our broker, we were unable to find a way to reduce those premiums without putting the city at risk. And so we have absorbed that increase into our budget. Those premiums are about $1.1 million for those lines of insurance. Last year, when we negotiated our contract with Aetna, we were able to negotiate a rate cap increase, which results in premiums increasing no more than 14% over the next 2 years, regardless of what our medical loss ratio is. And remember, the medical loss ratio is how those premiums are calculated. Essentially, whatever the premiums are that we're putting in versus what they're paying out in terms of expenses. And so, in July, there was a question posed regarding our work on infrastructure projects over the course of the current fiscal year and what projects we had planned in fiscal year 2024. So the next 3 slides in your presentation and in the informational memorandum that you received, those projects are reflected there. In addition, we wanted to provide some additional detail to you, which further explains the impact of those projects in our community. So Destin and Sam just unveiled a map, which is behind you if you would like to see it a little bit closer to you. A smaller version of this map is behind you. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about specifically those infrastructure projects that we have worked on this year and projects that we will work on in the coming year. The green and gold projects on your map, those are our general obligation bond projects. 6 projects have either been completed or are under construction.
Excuse me,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Clay. Could you have them to turn this board, your board, towards the audience, please?
I will. Y'all gonna do that? I'm gonna move this out the way. I'm gonna step on out the way because I don't want to be responsible if they break it. Y'all good? I'm stand over here, I guess, so that they can see it. And the folks watching on channel 77 and on YouTube can see it. A little muffed? Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're the weatherman today.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you. It's a little muffled, but we hear you.
It is a little muffled. It is a little muffled.
Is it really?
But
Okay. All right. And so the green and gold dots on your map are general obligation bond projects that we worked over in the current year and in the new fiscal year, what we will work. And so Those projects totaled about $17.9 million on this map. The orange and purple dots respectively represent those beautification projects and weatherization projects that we worked on. Approximately 40 projects in total between those two programs, totaling about $840,000 that we have spent. In yellow, our traffic calming projects, and these include the projects that we have talked about that are related to speed humps, other traffic calming devices that we may place throughout the city. In total, there are about 45 of those projects that we are looking at, totaling $852,000 in investment. $750,000 budgeted in the current year, about $100,000 spent last year. In blue, these are our drainage projects. Some of them may be single location drainage projects or road drainage projects. A lot of that work is occurring in the southwest and northwest portion of our city and in the new annexed area. That area was very bad in terms of drainage, and we're working a lot of projects over there, and you can see that here. For the folks in the audience, you can see that here is our annexed area and those blue projects over here in the southwest and northwest part of the city. In red and pink, those are our road projects. Those are sidewalk projects, road resurfacing projects, and ADA projects that we're doing throughout the city. You can see again, a lot of that work is occurring over in our annexed area, in the middle or downtown portion of our city, in the northwest quadrant, throughout. So there are many, many, many road projects that are going on that encompass and cover the whole city. Those road projects account for about $21 million in investment. The drainage projects account for about $16 million. In total, the investment that you see on this board is $56 million approximately from the city. And this is just in the span of 2 years. Understand that many of these large-scale infrastructure projects span 2 to 5 years. So as we continue to grow and as we continue to look at our data, we believe we will continue to spend at these levels or greater over the next several years. And so while there may not be lots of excitement generated around many of these projects, what I'd like you to do is reflect on a statistic that we presented at the July workshop, where we talked about for every $1 of public investment, we generate $17 of private investment. And so doing that math, these $55.9 million turn into $950 million of private investment. And so Mayor Harris, Vice Mayor Wilson, members of the council, as we articulated in the budget message, we believe this budget sets the framework for continued investments, both public and private, to propel the city into its next 20 years. So with that, Mayor Harris, any questions? We'll be more than happy to take those.
Thank you, Mr. Clay, and thank you, Mr. Manager. Are there any questions that the dais may have?
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead, Mr. Stevens.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Deputy City Manager, for your presentation. Can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your presentation. It does my heart well to see the infrastructure projects that we have completed and what we have slated in this new budget cycle to take place throughout the city. I want to raise a concern around infrastructure projects. I see here in the memo that was recently sent out to us earlier this week, if I'm not mistaken, where it outlines the Formula One Community Benefit Plan. I see a portion of the funds are allocated for septic to sewer program.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I want to suggest to direct those funds to essentially a reserve account, and that way we can use those funds not just for that particular program or that particular initiative, but other infrastructure issues. I do know that we have agreed and have had conversations, the mayor, the city manager has had conversations with our county chairman as it relates to a project that he's spearheading or leading from the District 1 holistically, and we, the city, is working to match those dollars or whatever that number looks like, and I'm totally fine with that. But my biggest concern is tying these funds up just to this particular program when we can use it for that, and should it need to be used elsewhere as well.
Okay, that's very doable.
Okay.
Just put it in working capital.
I think
Just
that
put it in working
is, oh, yes. And I guess as it relates to when we move forward with the budget, we can talk about allocating or using funds to create programming around assisting residents with seawall on their individual properties. I do know throughout the year, a few months ago, we passed a resolution that will allow you all to move forward with contracting individuals to maintain the walls along the canals throughout the city. But if we can create a program similar for assistance that we would do through our community development department or whatever program that we have in place where we provide assistance, that would be greatly appreciated as well.
Okay.
Mr. Clay, according to this board, we're doing some stuff along the seawalls, correct?
Yes, Mayor. If you look in just above 826, between 826 and about 175th Street, that's where the majority of it's going on your map. But I think if I'm hearing the councilman correctly, what he's talking about is even though we would reinforce the embankments along that, I believe he's talking about the erosion that is taking place in individual homeowners' yards.
Yes.
And we would be able to do that.
Yeah, I'm in
with what
agreement
he's
with.
saying.
I'm in agreement with. I just wanted to make sure that we already were in the process of doing some stuff along those seawalls.
Yes, sir. Yes.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And I know also here, as it relates to the Formula One dollars for scholarships, I know in past we've highlighted it for it to be designated for high school seniors, but I also want to, I guess that's a cleanup item. Where
Why you
we
laughing?
can,
How is it a
that's an insight, a cleanup item, but I want us to essentially look at amending the language for just high school students, but current college students that are Miami Gardens residents, so that they would be able to benefit from those resources as well.
We will take care of that, Councilman. As I read it here, it says high school senior / graduate, and we'll clean that up a little bit just to make it a little bit clearer for everyone.
Yeah, I appreciate it. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, Mr. Craig, as it
Somebody
relates
said?
to the,
Who
I was asking a question about the Formula One scholarship.
Go ahead.
So, when we say when we say college, are we saying Miami Gardens college student?
That's correct. Miami Gardens.
Not a college student who's attending here. You understand what I'm saying?
No. You have to have Miami Gardens residents. That's
Resident that's in college.
that's correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Somebody else had a question?
yes, I have a question.
Go ahead.
And so, well, I just, first of all, want to commend you all, the staff, for your hard work and diligence on putting this budget together. I know you all have had sleepless nights, and so the light at the end of the tunnel is near. And so as it relates to the Formula One funds, and Councilman Stevens brought up a very, very good point as it relates to the septic and sewer program. My question to you is, I know for the fiscal year 23-24, it's estimated at the 404 mark, give or say. Do we expect to see that fluctuate as the years progress? Or is it going to be a fixed number?
You're talking about our contribution to septic to sewer?
Yeah, the 40398, the 43986. Is that going to be like a set number for the next 8 years or so? Or is it going to fluctuate?
Well, if you're talking specifically septic to sewer, We have accounted for those projects in conjunction with what Miami-Dade County is doing in our stormwater fund and also some of the ARPA funding that we had received. Here, if you're talking specifically about the Formula One allocation, then
That's
what
what
we
I'm
would be
talking about.
doing is we would be taking whatever is remaining after we made those other allocations and putting into a reserve. Could they be used for septic to sewer if that came up? Yes, but we would not be holding them in anticipation of the county's septic to sewer process. We would still be working on some of the programming that Councilman Stevens had talked about.
Okay. All right, that answers my question. So I'm very happy to see the appropriations presented for the F1 funds because I feel that they align with the immediate needs of this growing community. And then lastly, you mentioned the debt service. I'm happy to hear that the millage rate went down for the debt service. Do you know when we're expected to be done? When we're expected to have it paid off?
The general obligation bond
No, the debt service on the building.
on this building, 2039.
2039? Okay. That's all I have.
Any other questions from the dais?
Yes.
I thought you would finish, man.
No.
Go ahead.
Mr. Deputy City Manager, can you elaborate on, I do know that there are a number of, I don't want to use the term here and there, but there are issues that arise throughout the community that raises certain concerns as it relates to the cleanliness, beautification. Can you elaborate on what this budget, how that budget addresses the issues of that, similar issues as far as contracted services and getting things as it relates to that out?
Yes, sir. So in our public works budget primarily, we have added to our contractual services line item to supplement those personnel resources that we have with contracted services to do some of the cleaning that you're referring to. We've focused on that over the last couple of years. I know that is something that is very important. And not only just in aesthetically, but when we talk about these drainage projects, when we have that type of trash and we have all that going down into our storm drains, it affects us in more ways than aesthetically. So we will be, having those extra resources will allow us to keep those drains cleaner and hopefully less flooding as we continue to work these drainage projects. So that's where most of that is found in our budget, in contractual services within Public Works.
Thank you.
We are not adding positions in Public Works.
So the contractual position, people.
Yeah.
So the contractual positions.
Yeah, that would be private organizations that we would be contracting with. But we don't, when you say positions, and what we think about is City of Miami Gardens personnel.
Yeah, that's what
We're not adding City of Miami Gardens personnel in Public Works, but we are adding dollars to use contractual services if necessary.
Okay. And why?
Why?
Yeah, why aren't we adding?
Well, right now, we do have vacancies in Public Works.
Okay.
And so it's generally not a good practice for us to add positions when we have significant vacancies that we may have trouble filling. Because those positions, you have companies out there that do that kind of work, so a lot of people are doing that. So there are about 7 or 8 vacancies, I believe, in Public Works right now that are the result of retirements, things like that. So we're going to work to fill those positions and in addition, bring in contractual services to supplement those as necessary.
Okay, and so, and here's why I'm asking, right? If we find ourselves in a situation where we have the annex, right, annexation, we have a lot more trucks that are parking everywhere around the city, and we have, we have a real big issue with the trash and a lot more people coming here. If we are not expanding our personnel, then is it included in the contractual services about the cleanup?
Yes, that's
Okay.
exactly what they would be doing.
Tell me how.
They would be contracted to go and do pick sticking. They would be contracted to go and clean medians if necessary. And they would go and be in those areas, specific areas that you're talking about, as identified by our maintenance superintendents, to try to eradicate the illegal dumping and those types of things. So when we can't get the services that we need from Miami-Dade County, we do have an agreement with them where they are supposed to be picking up any piles within 3 days. If we can't get that type of a service, we'll deal with it with the county, but rather than allow the piles to stay there, we would have access to these contracted services to be able to go and pick those piles up, as an example.
You look like you're deep in thought.
Well,
Here's my issue, right? And I'm not certain how I should address this. That's why I was pausing. It's been a problem of mine about cleaning the city. And I've said that parks is the hallmarks of how our city ought to look through and through. I recognize that we are in a difficult position because some of the roads don't belong to us, right? Whether it's a state road or a county road. Either way you go, every day we're waking up, we're finding that those roads are ill-maintained. And we also are finding that as we continue to have sellout concerts and other incredible events that the city is hosting, it's a lot more people here, and it brings a lot more of need for us to expeditiously clean our streets and enforce the code. And so for me, and in my mind, I want to make sure that we have the kind of personnel that is both on board and contracted to get it done quickly. And that means that the next day we ought not see evidence that there was any type of event here in this city, let alone 3-4 days later, where we are still seeing signs on gates and obscenities written on the corner of our city with stuff like that. You follow me? So when I'm looking, and we got contracted services and we got open positions, and our city is still not clean, that concerns me because something's not working. So I want to see a budget that allows us to have the public works, the code enforcement, all of that needs to be working, because right now it isn't. You follow what I'm saying? And if now is the time for the budget to be amended so that we could make sure that it's there, because I was looking at these positions, and because they were a different color, I thought that they were added. But the different color means that they are vacant?
I'm not sure what color.
I'm sorry,
Hold on,
Mr.
hold on.
No, I'm sorry. What
let him-
positions are she looking at? I want to
What
follow.
page are you looking at?
I'm on 300.
300.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And
No, the colors are just sort of for, it shows the reporting relationships between positions. No, it doesn't mean that they are
I
filled
thought that those were,
versus vacant. But
okay.
you do have, as far as staffing is concerned, in terms of the number of positions, we believe that we have the number of positions correct. But many of them, again, are not filled currently because of retirements and people leaving, and some people that we're hiring who we found that they want a job, but they don't want to work. So they can't be here. And so if we have to supplement that with the contractual services that we're talking about
Yeah. So
to
now let me,
backfill those vacancies, similar to what we did when we lost the aid of the construction crews. So
So let
the
me
number
ask
of positions that we have in the budget is adequate. But we need to work to fill them, which we are doing. But in the meantime, we have to contract those services because those are readily available for us
Yes, sir.
to do some of the work that we
I
need.
got you. So now why aren't we hiring the people?
Why
What's-
what?
Yeah, why are the positions vacant? Why haven't they been filled? Because it seems like we got positions that's not being filled and, you know,
But we're working to fill those positions.
how long they been vacant?
It varies. I mean, all of them have not been vacant the same amount of time. But as these gentlemen and ladies retire, we prepare for that, and we advertise, we interview. There are many, many reasons why a person may not be hired, and there are many reasons why we bring them on, and sometimes they don't work out. But I think that's a normal cycle in the hiring process.
Yeah, it is, but what's abnormal? What's abnormal? One is to know you're going to have people retiring and you haven't started the bench. You don't have people that are in line for those positions. At least, I mean, I'm not going to say you don't, because I don't know if you do or you don't. So I apologize for making that assumption, because I don't know. But it appears to me that the positions might be being vacant too long. And what ends up happening is that the staff gets burned out because, for whatever reason, we're not getting people hired in a sufficient enough time. And then when the people are hired, it doesn't seem like, well, you know, they staying. So I'm asking a question about, one, turnover, two, about attrition, right? Because we have some great people that have been here for a very long time, but guess what? It's that time. So we've got to, what internally are we doing to promote from within, or to reorganize, or, you know, I'm just wanting to get some idea about that.
Well, in terms of retirement, and what we do across the board is, once we are notified that an individual is retiring, we then begin the recruitment process. One of the other things that we do during the formulation of the budget process is we ask our directors if there are any individuals in their department who have sort of notified them that they will be retiring. In addition, in human resources, we look at all those employees who are retirement eligible to see where they are in the process. Maybe some of them have entered the drop, maybe some of them have said they're not going to enter the drop, and so on and so forth. And this is how we sort of then prepare for what we're going to do from a human resources standpoint. Put the positions out, we begin to advertise, we begin to interview, and in those situations where we find a suitable candidate, we bring them on. But this is not a Miami Gardens problem, it's a universal problem in terms of trying to hire qualified people. So our next best alternative is to bring in private companies who can supplement some of those while we continue to try to hire.
Okay, here's my suggestion. No, here's what I want done. I'd like for us to be able to evaluate whether or not we have people that are already in this city that can move into these positions. We ought to be able to have some way to promote within. And we ought to have a plan or some type of visual where we can see who's eligible in 5 years to retire, and what is being done with the existing staff to allow them to transition into those spots. Because in this, I ran a business and I had temporary workers, and they're good sometimes. But in the business of working with our residents, we need people who know them. We need people who understand the city. We need people who have buy-in. And people who are not just here for a moment and they're gone, and then the road that you fixed has knocked cars out of alignment. And some of that to me comes from temporary work. And so then it gets to be a costly factor because maybe somebody has to come back and do it. I'm saying that I worry a lot about the continuity of practice and the stability of our city when we can't seem to get people hired in a timely enough manner. I don't even know why that's happening.
Mr. Manager?
Someone said they had a question.
Yeah.
You got a question?
Right, because I want to make sure I'm following exactly where's the budgeted positions that we're adding into the budget?
They're included in the total count. So let me run
So
through.
we don't have a breakdown of, you don't have to run through them if,
No.
No, if you're looking at a specific department, I can tell you what we've added. So in the police department, we have added 7 police officer positions and 3 community service aide positions. I know that's something that we had talked about on several occasions there. That is the biggest add. We have added the PACE position for the educational program, but those are included in your
throughout the
total
budget.
employee count. Yes.
Did we make any adjustments to the staff for code enforcement?
We did not.
Okay. I think, and I'll say this, and the manager, I think what the vice mayor is saying as it relates to the hiring of the positions, I agree because I'm not necessarily sold on the fact, we budget for these positions each year, but we're not filling them like we should. And I think that merits a conversation as it relates to not necessarily just this particular budget now, because it's hard to say that we have adequate enough staff and we budget for the right amount of staff and if we're not filling the positions. So in my opinion, I think it just needs to require us to direct our attention, or the manager to direct this attention to the Human Resources Department as it relates to the recruitment component and how are we getting the information out to the community, and making sure that we have a fair process to ensure that we're bringing on, we're creating that opportunity for the residents to be a part of the Miami Gardens family.
Let me just say, let me correct one thing, Councilman. We did add a senior code enforcement officer in code. But in terms of filling positions, I want to make sure when we say we have vacancies, I don't think I've ever been in an organization that didn't have some vacancies. The vacancies that we're talking about are vacancies that we fill them, then you may have someone else that maybe retired, they leave or whatever. We had 8 vacancies, maybe now we have 6. And so that's something that's constant throughout. So the positions that we're talking about, these aren't positions that have been sitting vacant for long, long periods of time. Our internal policy says that if we have not filled a vacant position within 6 months, we sit down with the director and examine whether or not we even need that position. Or we look at ways that we either reclass the position or we do something else with it so that we can fill it. So these aren't vacancies that are just sitting and sitting and sitting for years and years and years. But you hire people, they choose to pick other jobs. You hire people, they work, they retire. These things happen, and this is what's happening here. Last year, we made improvements to our pay scale, especially at the lower levels. So that made a big difference in terms of us bringing on positions at certain levels in parks and in public works and in other departments where we needed to fortify those salaries. And so I think as we continue to work through some of these things, and as individuals decide out in the world that they want to come back to work, I think we will have better chances at making sure that we get people, they stay, and so on. But in the meantime, we are taking private organizations to supplement those places where we don't have filled positions.
So I'm well aware as it relates to people filling positions and then leaving for opportunities. I'm in management myself. But I think my concern, there's something wrong with these mics. They keep going in and out. I think my concern is the marketing point. How are we marketing these positions? Because what we're budgeting for here, if you look on the City of Miami Gardens website now, these positions are not listed. So the vacancies that we're budgeting for, the vacancies that we have budget for not to necessarily say that every position has to be filled within a week or two or a month or 6, through whatever the case may have you, but how are we ensuring that this information is getting out so that we can create essentially a pool of qualified applicants, or we can filter through? And that's why I suggested that we, the manager, him and you all look at what is the process as far as human resources. How are we going about with filling the positions in our departments that are vacant?
Fair enough.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Manager, hold on a second. Let the manager speak real quick.
No, I'll
You gonna
for
yield,
council
sir?
members, and I'll
Go
come
ahead,
back.
Councilman.
Good afternoon. I know this is a budget meeting, but since we're on the topic real quick, I did have some conversations with some of the different directors, and particular director was looking for some staff. And so to what the councilman and vice mayor is saying, I instructed that person that there are different organizations that we can reach out to that aren't necessarily checking Miami Gardens' website to see if we're hiring. But when we started this police department, as you know, they did a national search. They went around and recruited people from all over to actually come to this city to work here. That's how a lot of people ended up here. And if we're looking for the best talent to be in the best city, sometimes we have to step our game up and go outside of the box in our recruiting measures. Now, with that being said, I know you said we have 7 new positions in our police department, but how many do we have that's still vacant right now?
Police officer positions?
Yes.
That are vacant? Give me 1 second. 7.
How many?
7.
7? And those are the 7 new ones that we're looking.
Those are 7 that are vacant. And I think we've had some promotions from police officer to sergeant, and we also have some that are currently in the academy at the current time, correct? How many? 8. Okay. 8. So once they get out of the academy, those vacancies and plus one of the new ones would be filled, assuming.
So we'll be at 100%?
No, you would still have the new ones that we're adding. 6 of those would still be vacant.
Okay.
You finished?
One more.
You finished?
Not yet.
Go ahead.
Okay, so with that, and go ahead, I'll come back.
Go ahead.
I guess also, since we're here, part of my problem is that there are people who apply for jobs that never get called. And if there is no outreach and a person doesn't necessarily have access to a personnel department or whatever the case may be, I'm of the opinion, I do believe that there are times when private companies are better to do it. But I don't want it to be that we become a shell of a city and it's all private people that work here with no vested interest. They're here to do one small amount, and the kind of things that make cities, really small cities like ours or big small cities like ours work, is the human resource that presses on with that. And I understand the two, but I'm still at this point where I don't know if we're transitioning our staff into more solid positions. I don't see where, and I'm just telling you what people have said to me, that they have went online, they have put applications in and never heard back. And I'm saying that, like, again, there are some places within our city that you can see opportunity within the department. And then there are some places where there is none. And so I'd like to see human resources, and when I say human resources, I'm not talking about necessarily a department. I'm talking about the people that are working with our city to have the human capital needed to get the job done in a consistent way. So here's what I'd like. I'd like a crosswalk of how a person applies for a job here. I'd like a crosswalk of how the outreach and recruitment and things like that go, and how does that impact what we see in terms of the hiring and the timeline that's necessary to onboard a qualified individual. I want to be able to see that. And then I want to be able to see what's the attrition. Who do we expect to be gone in 0 to 5 years? And then what's the plan internally to ensure that those vacancies are going to be filled? That's fair? And the approximate cost to it. In other words, what does a director make now of a public works department? Is that significantly less or more than what we're currently paying? And if we have to go out and recruit people, then are our human resources in line with where the city is growing? You follow what I'm trying to say? Sure. Okay.
Councilwoman Julian.
Sure, thank you. So circling back, you had mentioned that there are a couple of trainees in the police academy. 7 or so?
8.
8? Is that the group that works out in the mornings here? Okay, so we have them, and then this upcoming budget, we're looking to hire 7 more.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. I just needed that clarification.
Mr. Manager?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and Vice Mayor and Councilman, I just wanted to also make mention, and I'm glad Councilman Leon brought this up, because at one time we had double-digit vacancies in the police department. So we've gotten down now to a point where we are actually in the process of hiring new officers, and then we also have vacancies. I mean, we're adding additional positions. I want to go back to something Vice Mayor Wilson mentioned, and you want us to do an evaluation of where we are with the hiring of folks and what that all entails, and I think we can do that. But the other thing I also want to add to that process is that if we are finding ourselves in a position, and we do at times, if we find ourselves in a position where we can't hire people because they're not qualified, then I also want to look at those positions that are vacant to see if we can use those vacancies to identify private folks to come in and do the job, so that we can also assign our people to other jobs that are required or more priority. So I want to add that to what you're asking so that we can look at it holistically, because if we can't hire people, or if people are leaving and we can't hire them, we still got to get the job done. We still have to do the things that we need to do. So to holistically look at that, I want to look at the fact that if we take those vacancies, whether there's 5 vacancies or 9 vacancies, we can use those funds and come back to you and show you that we can use those funds to hire outside contractors to get the job done. Because at the end of the day, as your manager, we have to get the job done.
I think that that's a great idea.
Okay.
However, I would like to see the contractor to be localized in this community.
I don't have a problem with that.
As long as we can find ways that we can break the barrier so that our local landscaping, our concrete, pressure washers, our street cleaners, or whatever the case we may have, that is local to the city of Miami Gardens.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
And I want to treat it as such.
Okay.
I want to treat it as such. So that would be my recommendation as we move forward. If we're going to look at it, let's look at everything with the intent that we can hire folks either from the city of Miami Gardens and or contractors from the city of Miami Gardens to do those jobs that are necessary so we can continue the city growing, cleaning, and things of that nature.
Go ahead,
Thank you.
Councilman.
Mr. Deputy City Manager, I was having a hard time hearing you, so let's go back to my initial question. So you said we had 17 vacancies, correct? And 7 new spots. That's what you said when it came to our police department?
No. I said we're adding 7 positions, 7 police officer positions, and we're adding 3 community service aide positions.
And the total number that was vacant right now that we're missing?
Was 7.
7. Okay. So that's still in the double digits.
No, that's not, I don't think you can count the 7 that we're adding as vacants because we haven't approved them and started advertising them yet.
But we know that we need them based on, you stated that we had 1,000 new units that was added to this community, right?
That's correct.
And they're gonna average probably about 4 people per unit, right?
Yes.
So we look at urban stats of policing, we look at 1 per every 80 persons, correct? 1 officer per every 80? What's the number? One officer for every 1,000? I don't think that's correct. So 1 officer for every 1,000 residents in this community, correct? That's what you're saying? I think that's incorrect. But based on the number of people that are moving into this city and the number of services or calls for service that we have in the city, we're still severely behind when it comes to that.
Well, I think, again, we're adding, I think we want to be very careful when we start talking about adding positions to our count.
And we also have to take into consideration what the Vice Mayor said about people who are applying for these positions and not getting calls. I had several people come up to me that applied for a reserve officer, which is very minimal, almost working for free. And we have yet to respond to their applications.
Okay.
So these are some serious issues, and we know that we have a call for service holding problem. And yet we continue to have people applying and they're not getting callbacks or even follow-up emails.
Okay. We'll look into those specific issues. And if you have more specific issues that you know of, we'll definitely take a look at those.
Let me have a quick, I'm sorry.
Oh, you finished?
Yeah, I'm done.
So officers are hired through where? The police department?
Ultimately, yes, yeah.
Okay, so but where do they apply?
They apply through our human resources system, NeoGov.
So they go through the human resources and then are brought into the process of, okay. So it's the same thing. It's not the police with the application, it's the human resources department and the processing part of that, correct?
If you're asking, do all the applications, every application for employment in the city comes in one way, through our NeoGov system. Now, that doesn't mean I want to go back to something that you talked about, Councilman, that we advertise in a number of different ways. So all of the professional organizations, for example, in the Parks Department, we will advertise our positions on FRPA, which is the Florida Recreation and Park Association, and the NRPA websites, National Recreation and Parks Association. In Public Works, we will advertise through the American Public Works Association. For our professional positions in building, we'll advertise through those networks as well. So we use our website, obviously, if someone's looking for a job. Indeed, all of those things where people would go to look for jobs, our advertisements are posted there. And again, in those professional publications, they're there. So
can we, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, so can we do this? Can we look at all of the applicants that have applied for these positions and have not received a follow-up email, a follow-up call back? Can we circle back? Don't we have that information in our data? Because if you call someone back or reply to an email, we have that information somewhere tracked, correct?
we do.
Okay, so can we look at these applicants who haven't received anything? And I guess in our meetings, you can bring that number back to us and the reason why they haven't received a call back or even a disqualification information, but just no communication at all is not acceptable.
Agreed. And if they, yeah.
Go ahead, finish, Craig.
No, I said agreed. I mean, we'll take a look at that and that, no communication is not acceptable.
Because you'll have the same people go and get picked up by Miami-Dade County and become a police officer, but we never reply back to them here.
Not only police officers.
Yeah, this is not.
I mean, that's my.
Yeah, and I think more so, and I think what my issue is as it relates to adding positions is that we have we're not getting, the applicants are not getting past the first step. And I think that's my biggest problem. We can talk about adding the position so that we can have adequate enough police, adequate enough public works, public code enforcement, but they're not getting past the first step. So I, in good faith, have a problem when you talk about adding positions, but we don't even know if what we've budgeted for is working effectively because we're not filling the positions that we've budgeted for year in, year away. And that's why I raised the issue as it relates to looking into the human resources process. What are we doing to advertise and recruit these positions? Because I know personally, I got a list of 10 people. I can do the recruitment for you. I got a list of 10 people across the city.
That's correct.
That has applied for public works, police, park and recs, and have not heard anything.
Nothing.
So let's
I'm
bring
just,
those.
hold on, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry.
No?
I'm just so concerned as it relates to the adding to the positions, and we ain't filled the vacancies. Now, I'm not saying, because I understand how an operating budget goes, that every position that we budget for needs to be filled. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that we have a problem and we need to look at it and address it. And as I hear the deliberation among my colleagues, it's starting to irritate me a little bit because we keep getting away from the core issue that's been highlighted, which is the recruitment piece. The retention, that's something that we fix once we get in. When you're transitioning into retirement, when you're transitioning into a promoted role, or you're leaving to go to another agency, that recruitment, that's something. I mean, retention, we do that once you get in. But the problem here is the recruitment aspects. What are we doing to market and promote? Do our human resources department have adequate enough staff, adequate enough tools? The funding that they need to properly promote these positions to make sure we have it here, that we're recruiting the people to the city of Miami Gardens. That's all I got to say about that.
Mr. Mayor,
Without lowering the standards that we require for them to be hired.
That's correct.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Just to add to my colleague's point, I agree with them, but I'm going to take it a step further. Because when I looked at the budget, it appears to me that we top heavy. And what I mean by that is we have people employed who are possibly making these decisions on who's going to be hired and not hired, sitting in their offices. When we have people, I'm going to just use public works as an example, out in the field, working, putting in some hard work. Not to say what you're doing in your office is not important and valuable, because it is. But I just see that we're too top heavy and we're getting comfortable in those roles. So we need to adjust and do it quickly so that we're able to recruit and retain some good workers and good employees. That's just my take on it. And I agree with what my colleagues are saying, because it is a problem, because I get the calls too. And I know people who have applied and haven't heard anything back. It's embarrassing. We got to do better. How we going to do it? I don't know. Maybe somebody need to come out their office. Let's do things different. That's all I'm saying. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So we'll
Mr.
gather
Mayor?
that information, correct? We'll gather that information that the councilman stated, and then we'll review all that and get back to those people if we haven't. You had something else?
Yes, I do. So I want to know, how many people do we have recruiting?
Doing recruiting?
Yeah, doing the recruiting, going through the applications. Because if we're looking at this holistically, it may be a lack of recruiters.
Human Resources has a total of 9, and about 7 of those are probably actively involved in the process. Fair? About 7?
Okay, so then how many people do we have actually processing the applications then? Like, who's actually processing these applications as they come in, to make the phone calls, to reach out to the people, to reach out via email? How many people do we have doing that? Because that's a task in itself.
Yeah, I would say about 7.
We have about 7? Okay. Because so maybe I'm just not comprehending this correctly, as I look at page 191 in the budget book, to me, it appears that we only have one person recruiting. So just a little explanation on that.
No, you have those individuals, the analysts, human resources analysts, your recruiters, your administrator, all of those folks, and the HR assistant, all of those folks are involved in that process.
They're all involved in that process.
Right, because there are different steps, as we mentioned, in that process. So it's not just the recruiter who would be involved in that. And a lot of the work is done up front with the system because there are certain things that are placed in there in terms of minimum qualifications that an applicant must meet. So once they place the application into NeoGov, it takes care of a lot of that. Is there a high school diploma? Yes. Is there a college degree? If it requires it, yes.
Okay. So as I listen to the concerns up here and as I try to take a look into what may possibly be happening, I know that we're hiring for police officers and community aid service personnel, public works, but I think HR may need more staff as well. More staff in HR to process these applications in a timely manner and to get us the brightest and the best and add more advertising money in their budget. So I don't know how much the advertising budget is for HR. Can you tell me that? Do you know that off the top of your head, or?
There are operating expenses in there where we, again, go out and we advertise in the professional association publications. We advertise Indeed and all of those different types of job locating services. And so I understand what you're all saying about the process, and we will look at that and we'll kind of document and flow chart it and see if, where there may be gaps, where there may be holes. I think we all agree that not communicating with people is an issue. If we receive an application, there is somebody that meets the minimum requirements of the job, as you said, Mayor, and we're not lowering our standards to higher, they should be contacted and they should be given an opportunity to interview for a position. We all agree on that. And we will look at that and we will examine it. I don't think the answer is to add positions without us having an opportunity to dig into whatever it is we believe the problem is. And that's not, for us to look at it, examine it, study it, that's not something that will have a budgetary impact because that's something that we will do at a higher level.
One of the things that I've appreciated when Dr. Bispot came and gave us a rundown of her office. Mm-hmm. And being able, her doing that gave us a piercing insight into things that we ordinarily would not have known. And maybe that's the case here. Maybe there's something about human resources that we don't know. And I'd like for us to have our human resources person to come and to do the presentation you're talking about, the crosswalk, the nuances of whomever, and it doesn't have to be her. You guys pick the person. I'm not in the management of that, but I want to know what's the bottleneck here. What is preventing the feeling of, and to be able to get a sense, because when I look, how many employees do we have?
580 full-time and about 170 part-time.
There are two people who handle benefits. And so that's a huge job to coordinate benefits and all of that, And so it's the same thing with healthcare and all of the taxes and, I don't know how that works, but I'd like to find out if that matters, because the staffing levels seem low for 500 plus employees. It's a lot, but it may be automation.
It is.
So that's what I'm saying. That's what I'd like to peel back and get an understanding from, so that I'm not I don't make any incorrect assumptions. I can have my questions answered, and it'll give me some insight as to how this thing here is somehow or another appearing to have a logjam.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to clarify one thing. So the number was, for every 1,000 residents, it should be 3 officers for every 1,000. That's the total number, according to urban police stats for a city this size.
So that's 1 per 90, at or about 90, one officer, 3 officers.
Three
for-
officers for every 1,000 residents.
Oh, okay. That's 30.
Mayor.
Go ahead,
Council
Manager.
Manager. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
No, I said the accurate number was, for every 1,000 residents, it's 3 officers.
Okay, gotcha.
So that's 320. It's 1 for every 300.
No.
One for every-
Three
for every 1,000.
Yeah, I know, but if you take
Oh,
3 and
you
divide it
divide it.
into 1,000.
300.
Right, that's 300 and.
Per officer.
I'm trying to act like I don't know how.
And Mr. Mayor, may I, real quick, I know we had some conversations and people came and we met with different groups on the interest of bringing back the Miss Miami Gardens pageant. I don't know what the will of the council was, but that was some conversation that had, some groups came forward. And I don't have the exact numbers on what that will look like, but we can get the numbers for the next budget meeting, but if that's the will.
I think they need to provide us with those numbers, and then we can look into it.
Okay.
Any other questions? Mr. Manager, you have anything else you want to add?
No, Mayor.
Mr. Clay?
I'm good.
Good? All hearts and minds are clear? All right, thank you, Mr. Clay. Great presentation. Great knowledge of the city. All right, show this meeting adjourned. They take it, boy. I'm gonna go give him a hug.